Okay, so, well, welcome everyone. And I'm going to take you on a little journey through the inside of one of the prettiest churches in the world tonight. This is Barcelona's Sagrada Familia. And I subtitled this A Symphony of Light and Color. And I think as you look at this first picture, you can see why I subtitled it that. This is the ceiling. And one of the things I'll just point out right now is every post you're looking at there is white. But it doesn't look white in this diagram because of the reflected colors that you have in this church. It's really an interesting place from that perspective. The last time I talked about this, I gave you some information on Gaudi, who's the principal architect, the founding architect of this, really. I'm not going to say anything more about him. He, of course, was the great Modernista type architect. That's sort of the Catalan version of Art Nouveau. He died, unfortunately, in 1926, long before this was going. It started in actually 1882 under a different architect, and then he took over in 1883, and he spent pretty much the remainder of his life on it. The thing I wanted to emphasize on this slide, though, was his passions. His passions were architecture, nature, and religion. Specifically the Catholic religion, obviously. And so we're going to look at what he's done and how he effectively broke the established rules of architecture to make this church. Now, on the original design, as I said, it had been done by another fella. They started building, and they were building the crypt and the facade around the back of the church, and that was already underway in when Gaudi took over. And so all he did there was to change sort of the height of the crypt, and that allowed light to come in from the outside. So you think of a crypt as usually, down in the basement someplace, and it's dark, and it's, you might have some candles, and it has a very atmospheric. I found this old photograph of, I'm not sure exactly when it was taken, early 1900s, I think. But I just love the way you can see the couple of beams of light coming in through the way he opened that up enough.
This is the crypt?
This is the crypt, yeah. Oh. And Gaudi is buried down here in the crypt. Well, I don't know, unfortunately or fortunately, there was a service going on. This is the one place where they do have regular services. Mass said down here, and that was going on while we were there. And so we didn't actually go down in the crypt this last time. The other thing is that the apse wall that has flying buttresses. So that is typical of Gothic style, what we would associate with Gothic. This is a Gothic revival church, the original design, which then gets transformed into something very different. Okay. The other thing I wanted to say before we got too far into this is that 7.5 meters is the unit of measure for this church. And what I mean by that is everything is proportional to 7.5 meters. For those of us who are English system only, that's 24.6 feet. And so what do I mean when I say everything is 7.5? Well, the minimum height of anything in this building is 7.5 meters. That's pretty big, 24, almost 25 feet. Okay. The towers are all multiples of 7.5 meters. We saw towers the last time I talked about this. There are 12 towers for the apostles. They are 13, 14, or 15 times 7.5 meters. There are 4 towers, of course, for the 4 evangelists, plus a somewhat larger in diameter tower for Mary. And those are all 17.5 meters. And then in the center, there will be the Jesus Tower, which is only partially constructed at this point in time. And that will be 23 times 7.5 or 172.5 meters tall. That will be the tallest church spire anywhere. Why did he come up with that number? Well, he came up with that specifically because there's a rock formation that's just outside of Barcelona that sort of dominates the skyline. And it is 175 meters tall. And Gaudi felt that man should not attempt to build something larger than what God had put together. And so he kept it to that. This just gives you that arrangement. The crypt would be over here underneath the Virgin Mary Tower. You have the 4 apostle towers here, and the Jesus Tower right over where the nave and the transept meet. And of course, you have the 12 apostle towers spread on the 3 sides with the 3 facades. The Nativity facade, which was done during Gaudi's lifetime, and has a lot of very beautiful art. I would say a little more traditional on the carving, and then the Passion facade on the other side, going all the steps through the Passion, but in a very different style, a very stark style. You might remember that from last time, or if you look at the YouTube presentation that we have on site. And then the Glory facade, which hasn't actually been fully built yet. And that is actually going to be the largest of the 3. Oops. Okay, inside the church, again, 7.5 meters is the unit of measure. We have the main nave. It's a very traditional floor plan, if you will. The main nave here, the transept this way, and those are both 15 meters wide, so roughly 50 feet. And the nave has 2 additional aisles on either side, which are 7.5 meters wide. The transept has, again, 1 aisle on each side, which is 7.5 meters wide. So you get all of that sort of together. It gives a consistency to the sizes and everything. The other thing you can see in this floor plan is you'll notice that I hope you can see my cursor here, my arrow, but you can see where this is coming around here, and there's something going around all the way. That's actually, you can walk through all of that. We couldn't actually at the time because they still are doing some construction in that area. But we'll get back to that, but I just wanted to point that out here. Because it's actually a cloister, okay? And it's called the Cloister of Our Lady of the Rosary, but it's not that normal cloister design. When most churches I've gone into in Europe, you walk in and there's a cloister. It'll be off to either the left or the right side. You'll essentially go out of the church. There'll be a big square open to the sky. Very pretty, very good place to pray, obviously, and a place for the clergy or monks or whatever, whoever is running the establishment to have separate for themselves. This is also a place to pray, this cloister, but instead of being sort of separate from the church, it actually runs around the church and becomes part of the church. And so that is rather different. As you come in, there's a statue, of course, up above the portal dedicated to the Virgin. It's surrounded by St. Dominic and St. Catherine, who were involved in spreading the use of the Rosary throughout Europe. And the doors of the portal are actually roses. So let me show you some of that here are the statues. Now this again this is on the same side as the Nativity. And so you have very sort of traditional statues on this side. But you can see very detailed work. You can see the roses into the statuary, the vines of the roses into the statuary as well. But even prettier, I think, is the door. This is metal, okay, and it's just incredibly beautiful with the flowers designed. A lot of very, very good craftsmanship to put into this. This type of craftsmanship takes forever, and we'll talk a little bit about that near the end of my presentation tonight. But you know, clearly, if you're going to do something like this and the level of this artistry, it's going to take time to do. And of course, this has already been going for a long time, this building process here. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but they are still constructing things. We could not walk all the way around the cloister. As you come out of that door, though, back out to the outside, and I got to say that the door is impressive enough that Don and I think, thought we were entering the church when we went in that way, and found that we weren't. That isn't where we really were. We weren't in the main part of the church. But as you come out, I just wanted to point out, this is on the outside, of course, but it's one of the nature motifs that you see, this giant tortoise here. And you have those built in all over the place. And the whole thing, the whole building, as I stressed the last time I talked on that, looks very organic. And it looks, you know, there's different types of fruit and things like that on the pinnacles. The whole thing looks like it grew out of the ground rather than was built. And so that's a very different sort of style again. So Gaudi was greatly inspired by the shapes and the colors that he found in nature, and he incorporated them into that. And he uses the windows of the church to generate colors of light, and that then plays differently on the columns that are the inside. So every time you go into this church, it looks different. We were there in this last spring. We were there twice, actually, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Okay, so in the morning, you got light coming through the east windows. In the afternoon, you got light coming through the west windows. They're different colors. The whole thing looks different because of that. My understanding is that it changes with the season as well. And so you have a very different sort of viewpoint of everything. The other thing you should know is this is really the first picture I've shown you of general inside here. And this is the sort of column that he has here. And it breaks apart here like into 4 different things. And we have literally greenery or you know, leaves, if you will, up here. And that's exactly a tree. Okay, you can see this tree next to it, and this really look the same. When you get into the inside, it's a forest of columns. And unlike, say, the Parthenon, where all the columns are the same width, here you have different columns of different diameters. Okay? So it's much more like a forest than a classic Greek or Roman building, or even a classic Gothic building would be. What are these branches here, branched trees doing? Well, what they're doing is they're bringing the weight of the roof down through to the columns and then down to the base, and that's supporting that roof. And it's a little difficult to tell from this view, but if you see this branch coming up here and this branch coming up here, they're actually coming up and behind the tree here and underneath the design in the ceiling, they're meeting. Yeah? And they're forming, if you will, a parabola here. And that parabola is giving it great strength to keep this building up. So he's using the parabola as a design element, but also as a structural element to provide strength to hold the whole structure up. And it's a very unique concept. Nobody had thought about anything like that before, and it really works extremely well. This shows you a little bit. Let's see, I'm going to move this someplace. Okay, this shows you a little bit of how this works. Here again are our 4 branches coming off like our tree, but as they're coming up, the number of sides on the column keeps changing. So you might start out with a 6-sided column, okay, which is effectively taking 2 triangles and putting them on top of each other, in essence, like a Jewish star. And then a little ways further up the column, the number of sides may increase. So you might go to an 8-sided column, which is taking 2 squares and twisting them 45 degrees relative to each other to get 8 sides or 8 points along the column. And then a little further up, you go to 10 sides, which is 2 pentagons twisted 36 degrees. And that's coming up. And then eventually that can break into 4 separate pentagons, each of which continues up, and you get more and more sides until at the very top, it's a circle. And so all of these columns are built that way. One of the reasons this building has taken so long to make is that's a lot of work, okay, to get that. The strength is in the overall construction of this and how he's used the parabolas and everything else to support the roof, but it really comes across as a forest, and it brings that nature into the building. So this, whoops, what happened here? Not sure what happened here, folks. Let me go back one. Okay, well, this diagram shows this is like the square on top of a square to give you 8 sides, and then you can get, octagons on top of octagons to get 16 sides, etc. So you can get more and more sides as you go up. And you can see that over on this column over here. Here, as you go up, and right here, where my pointer is now, you double the number of sides. And as you go up further up there, very much more difficult to see, you double them again. And so it keeps getting more and more sides to these columns. This just shows, again, the parabola as a structural element, which he used not only on the inside, like this one, so you can see that coming up, forming a parabola, coming back down, pushing the weight towards the floor, but here on the outside, and this is, of course, the Passion facade, and there were parabolas in that as well, building that up to hold this roof part, which then has quite a bit of weight. And we'll get to this structure up here. These, as you can see, remember, this is the Passion side. These are effectively bones, look like bones, when you're looking at them. And that was in a small diagram that he made, but there weren't a lot of plans. And let me just back up a second and remind you of something I had said the last time I talked about this church, and that was that, well, first, he didn't leave a lot of detailed plans. Secondly, about 10 years after he died, in 1936, there was, of course, the Spanish Civil War, and a couple of anarchists bombed Gaudi's workshop and burnt all the plans. So we have relatively few sketches and things like that of what he intended for this structure. So people have had to really work on that, and the succeeding architects have had to take what he had and try to figure out, well, what would he have done? And part of that is what works. That is what is structurally stable. And so they've done an analysis of this, and I'll talk more about that later on. But these parabolas are very dominant in that structure. These are just a few more, but you can see they're all over. The other thing I wanted to show you here is up here. You can see these balconies here. This is the choir loft. This is so that's built in there along the walls nearer to the glory entrance. And this just emphasizes the sort of number of pillars that you have of different sizes, and holding up that roof and giving you this effect of being in a forest, which is the effect that he wanted to get. The other thing you're starting to see again is different colors on these pillars, but I got better shots of that. Well, as I mentioned, the color and the light inside the church is quite a surprise when you get there. The way this was done is the colored glass is darkest closest to the ground and becomes more translucent as you go up. It doesn't have the medieval stained glass Bible story look that you're probably used to. Most medieval cathedrals in Europe, of course, you go in and you have sort of complete Bible stories told in the stained glass. Here we're primarily looking at pure just glass, colored glass, with some things put in. Names of saints, names of other holy places around the world are incorporated into that, but not the detailed figures and that type of thing that you might be used to. What happens is, of course, the light comes through, it then colors the white columns. The white columns are actually different shades of white because they use different types of marble in there. And that gives you a whole host of different colors and shading of colors. There are no flat surfaces in this church. I mean, everything is got curves to it and that type of thing. And the consequence to that is that the light is reflected and spread around the inside. And so you get a much more dazzling array of light inside the church than you would in a lot of other churches. So here are some of the windows. The one that probably this one on the right it gives you a better idea of how this works, with the darker colors and more complete colors down at the bottom. And as gradually you go up, you get much more translucent up here. And so you have different colors on the east side versus the west side, and you get more of the greens and blues on one side and more of the yellows and reds and oranges on the other side. This is up towards the altar. The altar is right about where this guy's standing behind there, I think. But you can see there's color going all the way around the church. Okay. We'll get to the crucifix later. And here just shows some of the things where there's people and place names incorporated into the glass up here in the round ones, but different color. But you can see it's not It's not a depiction of a person here specifically or anything like that. It's just a number of different colors and things on that order. So you have a whole wall of this then, which then changes colors along the wall. So we go from blue to green to, and then there are some red and oranges over here. The other side has more red and orange and only a little blue and green. So the nativity side tends to be blues and greens. The passion side tends to be reds and oranges. But when the light comes through, then you start seeing the reflection of that on the pillars, on all the columns going up. And that's what gives you the remarkable feats of it here. And these are the side aisles, so you get to see how wide. That's 7.5 meters, but you can see it's a lot taller than that going up. So it's a huge church. I tried to find out how many people could be in this church at one point in time, and I found several different answers. They're all unbelievable. I mean, from normal sort of thing. But the answers ranged from 9,000 to 14,000 people could be in this church at one point in time. It is huge, okay? Just in case you were wondering it, but I think you get that impression. Here's some other ones, so you can see different colors coming through. And this is I think this is my personal favorite photograph that I took inside this church, because it really illustrates a little better than a lot of the others what dazzling color is reflected off the surfaces of the basilica. And I guess I should back up and say that this is a basilica. It is obviously a cathedral-like church, but it's not a cathedral, doesn't have a bishop in it. It was originally going to be, a new church for a growing area of Barcelona. I don't have it in the presentation, but I saw a slide of them laying the cornerstone, or a picture of them drawing of them laying the cornerstone, and you see one or two houses in the background going back to the horizon. I mean, there's virtually nobody living in this area when they built it. Now, of course, it's totally built up. But this is what you get on the inside. Now, here, I'm circling here is the crucifix and the canopy that's over it. We'll talk about that in a second. And way up here behind that, or over that, is the Mary, Mother of God tower, okay? And part of that we have right here. And this lets through light. This is a closer up view of that. And this lets through light that shines right down onto the altar. So a lot of thinking about, how could we focus the light and do that? Okay, I wanted to say a couple of words about the crucifix that is there, because I find it rather unusual. I think maybe the most unusual thing is Christ is looking up, not down. Very often crucifixes, Christ is looking down. And the face, if you look at it, is maybe not our normal image of Christ. And frankly, it isn't, because this is being modeled by one of the workmen who was working on the cathedral. And I'll tell you that story in just a second. But the other thing I wanted to point out, we have this canopy over it, which represents, of course, the Holy Spirit, and built into that canopy are symbols. And you can, difficult to see the wheat here, but you can easily make out the grapes for that. And so all these sort of little details of how to do this, and Gaudi had thought about that. This crucifix was actually done while he was alive. And he sort of shepherded every detail. And to show you what detail he went to, this is the gentleman who actually modeled for that. And Gaudi had him hang up on, hold on to these two pegs and essentially hang on to the crucifix until he got exactly the view he wanted. And he has mirrors behind here, and there was a whole host of cameras out here. And when he got exactly the view he wanted, he said, now, and people took pictures. And then another group of 5 or 6 guys came up and made a plaster cast of the guy. And they generated that crucifix from that. And that's again, just shows the detail that he went to and the effort he went to. This is the organ. Now that's been installed very recently, 2010. This organ has 26 stops of 1,492 pipes in it, and that's an impressive organ to start with. But this church does have some acoustical challenges because of the size and the number of surfaces and the curves of the surfaces, etc. So they're going to put in several additional organs. And these organs will be associated with different parts of the building. And what's interesting is they can be played separately or from one single keyboard. They can be played all as one large organ. And I believe, if I remember correctly, when they're played as one large organ, the total is something like 8,000 pipes. I really do want to come back and hear that one sometime. There was no organ music while we were there. Okay, so the area that hasn't been done completely is there's really 2 areas on the outside. The Jesus Tower in the center has not been completed. And then the glory facade has not been completed. And eventually the glory facade will be the main entrance to the church. And that will be even bigger than either the Nativity or the Passion facades. And it will try to tell the whole story of humanity and the path to eternal happiness, the path to heaven. The door to this facade was, and I'm not sure how to pronounce Joseph's name, Subarax or something like that. He did the Passion facade, that very angular, stark type carvings over there. What the doors to the glory facade are is the Lord's Prayer in Catalan, but surrounded by give us this day our daily bread in 50 different languages, including Aramaic. Just an interesting thing. And here you can see the doors as they will be. They're not actually, this is not the final installation, but you can see them there. And I wasn't actually trying to get the English version here. See, but you can see down here at the bottom, I caught most of it, but I didn't get quite all of it. Give us this day our daily bread. It will be over here. But you can see all the different languages that they've put into that. The other things you see is we have, of course, at the intersection of the transept and the nave, the 4 corners are the 4 evangelist towers on the outside, and each of them is I can't sometimes see this. Each of them is symbolized by an ellipsoid medallion giving the symbol for that evangelist. So the angel for St. Matthew, the lion for St. Mark, the ox for St. Luke, and the eagle for St. John. And this piece here, this is inside the church right now, but will not remain there. This is the, just to give you one example, obviously the ox for St. Luke, but this will go on top of the St. Luke Evangelist Tower in the center of the church. So it'll be on the outside eventually at the very top of that tower. And there will be other pieces then for the other three evangelists. Well, there have been lately fairly rapid progress on this. Donna and I visited this church once before. That was in 1997. And most of the columns were not there. There was no roof at all. No stained glass to speak of. Really very different church. And to come back this last spring, and we were over there in the first week in March, and to see it almost completed, in roughly 20 years, whereas the first 100 years, almost nothing. Well, not almost nothing, but very little thing. What was quite remarkable. This is a very complicated project, and one of the things I read was by an architect who is actually a Yale architecture professor, Mark Foster Gage, and he characterized Sagrada Familia as the world's most complicated and time-consuming architectural project. The construction's been going on for 138 years now. It's still not finished. Just to put that in context, that's 6 times as long, or more than 6 times as long, as the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yeah. Some things have changed in recent years. It used to be that money was a big problem here, as it is with most church buildings, and our own included. And I don't think we can suggest this solution to pastor, but but originally the funds were all generated by donations, and so you had this Society of St. Joseph that started this, and they would raise money and they would try to get other donations, and they got a little money together, they'd build a little more, and that type of thing. Nowadays, because of the incredible beauty of the place, this has become one of the 2 biggest tourist attractions in Spain. The other one's, of course, the Alhambra and Granada. And it gets between 3 and 4 million visitors each year. And as an outside tourist, non-Spanish tourist, we paid about almost $50 a piece to tour this place. Okay. So you can do the math. That's about 150 million a year, and so that has been a major thing. When money is no longer a problem, that makes life a lot easier. I'm sure Barta would like to have those types of finances for our property committee. The other thing that has changed is robots, and this may seem kind of weird to you, but they're using robots and 3D printers to greatly speed up the process. You have to realize they didn't really even have a complete model of the church, of the whole basilica, until 2012. That's only 8 years ago. And then that was generated by a 3D printer and a computer program. So they've done a tremendous amount of work on that. And some of the things that this has done for them is it's increased the precision of prefabricated pieces. So if you're trying to fit identical columns together or something like that, and you can make them to be exactly the same, then that makes all of that a lot easier. They can make models of things, like the ox with wings for the pinnacle of the columns, that type of thing. They can produce a model of that with 3D printing and try to make sure that it's going to work, it's going to look right, it's going to be right before they attempt to carve it. They can ensure the fidelity of the forms and spaces as designed by Gaudi, so they can try to look at that. And of course, needless to say, it increases the speed of carving. If you got a robot, it can carve day and night, and it doesn't get tired, it just keeps going and that type of thing. So a column, one of those columns, still, even with a robot, requires about 4,000 hours or 166 days and nights to carve one column. Yeah. So that's still a lot of time, but it's a lot shorter than if you'd had to do it manually. For a lot of the pieces, particularly the more detailed things, they have final finishing, which they still do manually. So there are a number of different types of robots. They have different types of saws, lathes, 3D printers, and they got at least one that has mechanical arms that apparently can go in and do very detailed types of things. They can work in a whole host of different types of materials, some of which, of course, stone is what is finally done for a lot of things, but they can also work in plaster and wood and plastic and for models and things like that. So when Gaudi was alive, he devised a method of essentially hanging weights. So this is essentially a church upside down. And what he's doing is he's putting the weights proportional to what he thinks different areas are going to be and seeing how that works together there. And that was sort of how he was trying to figure this thing out. Today, we have computer simulations and 3D printers, and this just shows their workshop and some of the 3D models that they've made. And here you can see a couple of models smaller than actual size will be for some of the winged column tops. These are the 3D printer, or two of the 3D printers over here at the side. And what they've done here is to have programs, and they've taken software that was used for airplane design. And the folks here in Barcelona working with Frank Gehry, designed the Pritzker stage downtown, and also did the Balboa Guggenheim Museum, things like that. And of course, his designs are, nothing straight in his designs either. And so those folks working together have come up with software to help them do this. And that's been very important, because what they had, due to the burning of all of Gaudi's original things, or his original studio and everything, very often all they have is rough charcoal sketches of a number of things. And so they have to figure out, sort of make a prediction, okay, what would it look like to simulate that? And then also, is it going to be structurally stable? Yeah. And so if you look at this facade, the Passion facade, over the top of this roof that's supported by the parabolas here, you have this sort of array of what effectively is bones here, and that was all designed taking in view of a charcoal sketch, which sort of showed what sort of things were on Gaudi's mind for that, and what the possible would be as predicted by this program. And then each of these bones was then carved by a robot, yeah? The initial carving at least. So they not only match what Gaudi had built already, so it fits in seamlessly, but it also predicts what he would do next. Well, what hasn't been completed yet is the Glory facade. This will be actually the largest and most important of the three, larger than the Nativity or the Passion. Dedicated to the heavenly glory of Jesus and represents his rise into heaven. Really, Gaudi only left a few sketches. And so it's really difficult, I think. You know, death, final judgment, and glory, as well as hell, are going to be portrayed here. And so there's a whole host of different sorts of things which will be on that facade: demons, idols, false gods, etc. It's going to have 7 large columns dedicated to the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And at the base, there'll be representation of the 7 deadly sins, and at the top, the 7 virtues. So the gifts: wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, piety, fear of the Lord. Sins at the bottom: greed, lust, pride, gluttony, sloth, wrath, envy. And virtues: kindness, diligence, patience, charity, temperance, humility, chastity. There will then be 7 doors for the 7 parts, if you will, of the Lord's Prayer, and 7 hyperbolic lanterns over that, illuminating the entrance. Realize that this is going to be the main entrance to the church when they finish it. So this is there was a lot of construction equipment in front of this, and you couldn't really get a good picture. So I got this off the web. This is actually a picture taken about 3 or 4 years ago. You can see it's a long ways. These columns are hardly up there. You know, you can't quite see, and there's no actual sculpture yet. And when this picture was taken, the columns right behind here were not even up. These 4 apostle ones, including, of course, Peter and Paul, who are going to be in the center here. What this is eventually going to look like is shown over here on the right. And as you can see, there's a stairway down here, but that's going to extend over the street and come down on the other side. And the plan is to actually knock down a number of buildings and build out along that direction. Originally, they were saying 2026, which would be the 100th anniversary of Gaudi's death. Frankly, I don't think they're going to make that, but certainly it will be coming. So main entrance was planned in that direction. That's in Gaudi's original sort of plans, if you will. Originally, that was all empty fields when he was alive. Now it's a built-up urban area, so there's a lot of problems there. And they're basically going to try to knock down a 60-meter wide avenue down for the 2 blocks going out that way, and have a wide green zone as well there. So I can see where there's some opposition to that, but I believe that the city council has in fact okayed that now. Okay, that's actually all I have. If folks have questions, but I guess before we go to that, let me just give you a quick thing of how we're going to finish up this term. Next week, Marcia is planning or heading up the plans for a Thanksgiving celebration in this hour. So please come and have a chance to do a number of things. Maybe she can tell us a little bit about that too. Then the week after, Richard is going to do a program on how Immanuel responded to previous pandemics. And then, since this is the 100th anniversary of the women's vote, we'll have Michelle Nicholson, who's an associate professor of history at Loyola, give us a talk on suffragettes, and the 19th Amendment on the 10th. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing at the moment and just sort of ask if there are any questions, comments, things. Remember to unmute yourself if you